Greeting, friends and fellow wanderers. Welcome back to another episode of the All Around Growth Podcast, a show that provides insight and tools to build the life and homestead of your dreams. Yesterday was a day of insight, reading from the book 365 Tao, written by Deng Ming-Dao. We are going to do the same today. We are likely going to do the same for the remainder of the week, returning to the mysticism of the Tao, providing far more insight than tools this week with regard to building the life and homesteads of our dreams. On this 32nd day of the year, the title of today's reading is Ubiquity. Tao is everywhere. It cannot be kept from the sincere. Tao originated in China and was an expression of that culture. It was intimately tied to a poetically agrarian view of the world, and it forged mysticism and pragmatism together. But now, most of us, even those in China, do not understand ancient words. Our farming is mechanized. Our poetry is written on computers. Does this make Tao invalid? No, it does not. Tao is still here, and if we are to follow Tao, we must rely not on old standards, but on direct experience. Contemporary minds need contemporary concepts to interest them. If following Tao is as great as the masters claim, then it ought to be applicable to any situation and any race. Neither time, nor place, nor culture should be a barrier to the sincere seeker. Tao surrounds us. We need only guidance and understanding in order to connect with it. Tao is not something esoteric. It is right here. The masters allude to this all the time. For them, anything, from reading scriptures to attending the theater, from meditating to sweeping dung from the ground, is Tao. They understand the ubiquitous nature of Tao and act accordingly. If masters still know Tao in this world of jet planes and electronic communication, then we can also absorb the essential message of Tao. Those who succeed might never talk of it, and yet everything they do will be spontaneously in tandem with Tao. As I walked to the truck this morning, thinking about what we would talk about and why I wanted to return to this book today, it dawned on me that there were several things that crossed my mind. And I didn't read this prior to jumping in the truck and sharing it with you this morning. But several of my thoughts, surprisingly or not surprisingly, seem to align with what we read in this morning's reading. So let's go there, shall we? Let's hit the road. You know, we live in a world And this is nothing new. For generations, as long as we have known ourselves and our parents and our parents' parents, we've lived in a way that's out of balance with nature. Every single episode I've mentioned, like today, welcome back to the show. Today is Tuesday, February 1st. It's the 32nd day of the year. And that's the 12-month calendar year. But that really doesn't matter because there's snow on the ground. We are months away from buds breaking on trees. It's winter time. We try to assign labels and things to life, compartmentalize everything, put it into a box, specify what it is. I mean, think about how we look at plants and animals and how they're named, primarily through the work of Linnaeus. We've got the Latin genus name and the species name. And furthermore, we have the variety or the cultivar. There was something in the reading about how we do not understand these ancient words. And even that is relevant. And what I mean by that is, I've mentioned this on one other episode. One series that I've been listening to, much of which is the individual reading a book that he'd written, or at least some passages of it. He's created a large body of work. His name is Clint Richardson, and I am currently listening to him share from his book Straw Man. And this is all part of a series titled, or a playlist rather, titled Red Pill Sunday School. And there's a lot of discussion about law, how it's written, what words mean, the importance of understanding the context of when it was written and what the words meant at the time it was written, and how we ourselves factor into the whole system itself, right? So it's long and it's complicated, and it's absolutely nothing that I can summarize in a single episode, let alone a series myself. And I'm not even going to try to. I will simply link to it again in the show notes for those that are interested. But the reality is, we say a lot of things that we don't understand. This is becoming more and more commonplace and even accelerated with the electronic communications and the way language is being bastardized. But this is the reality in which we live. And I think that it's good to not only expose ourselves to culture and that's which is going on, but to expand our minds otherwise and think about what we're thinking about. What we're thinking about, right? Go deep into your mind and unpack what's there and why. And a lot of one way in which you can do that is by reading from books like 365 Tao and refreshing yourself with this kind of perspective. On social media, Facebook, which I'm not as active on as I used to be, but every once in a while I will see memories pop up from 10 years ago. Oftentimes photos of this book with the corresponding quotes. I'm still referencing it today. I understand that the Tao is vague and full of ambiguity and oftentimes hard to understand. I like to read from it, not necessarily because of that, but I like to read from it because I feel that oftentimes people are turned off by the ideas of Christianity and talk of God. There's this tremendous misunderstanding of everything within, let's just say, the church. And there's a tremendous misunderstanding of why. And that is a large part of the reason why I continue on my own spiritual journey. Which historically and still does include, but certainly isn't limited to, Christianity. So rather than just focus on one aspect of the spiritual life, let's enter in more ideas about it. But again, there's, I like to say that Tao is God, but God is not Tao. And that's a whole conversation in and of itself. But when we think about this, there's many aspects to the spiritual, there's many aspects to the idea of God, the Creator. The infinite being. Whatever you want to call it. But these ideas of Tao date back far, far beyond, or far before a lot of thoughts on Christianity, at least those of the New Testament. There's more in the Old Testament that's of this kind of mystic nature and stories of God. And if we look back at creation mythology, historically throughout the world in different cultures, there's also many similarities between the shared creation story of us all. We're really not all that different. We're not that different than we were 10,000 years ago. 10,000 years ago, we weren't that different than we were 100,000 years ago, but we are going through rapid change in all aspects of life right now. Experiencing far greater change than perhaps we ever have in the past. But it's all relative. One can argue otherwise. And those are all fun discussions to have, but for what? Tao is everywhere. It cannot be kept from the sincere. In conclusion, as I make the final turn and get ready to turn into the farm, I've given some thought and consideration about all of my goals, which I've talked about extensively in the past. And one of the ideas that I've come to embrace is this idea that it's not necessarily about doing what I want to do and setting the goals that I want to set, but it's trying to live a life that allows me to understand what it is that God wants, what it is that the Spirit wants, what it is that the Tao wants. But oftentimes that's nothing. And the beauty of the challenge is trying to find balance and harmony. Within that, trying to understand that which cannot be understood. And with that, guys, that is a wrap for today's episode. If you like what you hear, check out the show notes. I will link to a couple of things that were talked about in today's show. And as always, I would encourage you to join us over on Telegram at t.me/allaroundgrowth, where we have a community of us core folks that are interested in discussing these things in greater detail and life in general. And you are invited. So we'd love to see you there. That's it, guys. I look forward to catching you on another show tomorrow of this winter week of mysticism and Tao. And we'll see you then. This is Rob Kaiser, and thank you.